621 here, Big 550, KTRS. Let's check in with Brad Garrett, ABC crime and terrorism consultant. He's got some insight into this South Carolina police officer who is officially now charged with murder. Brad Garrett, thanks for checking in.
Good morning, Grog.
That's really what we've sort of seen as of right now. What are your thoughts as you sit and watch this story?
Well, not knowing the initial interchange between Mr. Scott and the officer, we have to make some sort of guesstimates here. But based only on the video, there appears to be absolutely zero justification to shoot him. I mean, I think he had some warrants for unpaid child support. There's no indication he had a weapon. Officer shoots him with a taser. That apparently doesn't take him down, and Mr. Scott panics and he runs. And you see the officer shoot him 8 times, according to the coroner, hit him 5 times, just for absolutely no valid reason.
So we're all searching for a reason. Could it be, and the tape is so egregious, could it be that there really is no other reason? I mean, it can't be just as simple as a racist cop. I mean, that's sort of almost too simple, but there's no other really explanation.
No, and we don't even know, McGraw, if it's racist. One could maybe draw that conclusion clearly based on cases you and I have talked about in several months. But clearly, his need to take excessive force or lethal force into his hands, he certainly felt justified. Bias-driven, not bias-driven, I don't know. But that part actually doesn't matter. What matters is what he did was wrong.
He was arrested for murder.
Correct.
Is that normal in a situation like this? I mean, have you ever seen a tape that has been this open and shut or this egregious?
No, I mean, other officers around the country have been charged with murder. You typically see them charged. There are at least one charged in Cleveland right now with manslaughter that involved the death of 2 people. What's the most interesting about this case, obviously, than the obvious, McGraw, the egregiousness of it, is the speed in which the district attorney in Charleston reacted to this and charged him. I mean, that is lightning speed.
You've got some research on some of this stuff. What does some of the research say?
Well, what's interesting is that because we end up talking about cases where white officers have shot African American, typically males, the question is, are cops more racially biased? Some studies would suggest maybe, others would suggest no, that they are no more racially biased than the general population. We're all, unfortunately, a product of our youth and growing up, McGraw. And so do we all take certain prejudices to adulthood? The answer is yes. Cops do also. But there's really no indication, other than Ferguson, which just is, an outrageous sort of racial bias situation down the street from you. Do I see that going on in other communities? It does go on. Do I think it goes on in a collective fashion? I think the answer is no.
Well, in terms of police shootings, just so that we're all on the same page, the Justice Department came out and said that Officer Wilson was justified in that shooting. So that you're talking about a different situation.
Well, no, I completely agree with that statement. All I'm saying is that they said the police department as a whole was racially biased. That's all I'm suggesting. Wilson is, obviously cleared from the shooting.
Yeah. One of the things that's so frustrating is how do you ever get to know what's in the mind of the police officer?
Well, that's extremely difficult. And I think what you have to do, McGraw, is just look at the facts, take race out of it for a second, and then see if it plays in from a secondary standpoint. Secondary in that what else can they find out about this officer that would suggest this was racially motivated? It's one of the reasons you now have the FBI looking at this case. They won't look at the murder so much. They will look at what I just mentioned. Now, could they charge this officer down the road with civil rights violations? It's entirely possible if, in fact, they can prove that he has a history and that this was racially motivated.
Okay, so in this case, he didn't have a body camera, but it was shot by, someone else who was nearby. What do you think in a case like this? Would it have mattered? Well, he could have turned off the body camera in this case.
Well, he certainly could have, and I will tell you the more recent studies on body cameras suggest that police are more careful about what they do because they know it's being recorded. So, would that have changed this officer's position? Maybe, maybe not. I think he clearly felt like nobody was watching him. He drops something by Mr. Scott. It still remains unknown as to what that is, which looks very suspicious. But I think he was very, comfortable that nobody else was there but the two of them.
Well, that's the $64,000 question: is if there were no video around, and somebody said, "Hey, I saw the guy running in the opposite direction," and the police officer shot him, nobody would believe him because police officers just don't do stuff like that.
No, other than McGraw, it would come out in the medical examiner / coroner's report, just like in Wilson's case. Remember all those reports that said that Michael Brown was shot in the back, and none of them ended up being true forensically. You would have had this. My guess is that based on what we know about this case, including in the video, eventually this officer would have been charged.
Yeah, interesting. Brad Garrett, ABC crime and terrorism analyst, also a former FBI man. Thanks for your time, Brad. Have a good week.
Anytime, McGraw. Take care.
628 here, Big 550 KTRS.